Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Supply Chain, the show that brings you the real stories and strategies behind the global supply chain industry. Because behind every product, every shipment, and every delivery, there's a supply chain story worth sharing. I'm your host, Sarah Barnes Humphrey, and today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful enablers of modern logistics, real time transportation visibility. And who better to guide us through that than Chris Mazza, Senior Vice President of International Growth at Shippeo. Shippeo is helping some of the world's biggest brands see what's happening in their supply chain in real time, and more importantly, predict what's coming next. So today we're talking about who they are, who they help, how they got started, and a real story of how they helped a customer not just solve a problem, but transform their supply chain operations entirely. So grab your coffee and let's get into it. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. And we're going to be doing a couple of these with Shippeo, which I'm super excited about because our audience is going to get to know a little bit more about you, some of the topics that we're talking about. But let's start today from the top. So, for listeners who might not be familiar, tell us, what is Shippeo? What exactly do you do?
Yeah, for sure. So first, the categorization that you gave us is pretty much self-explanatory, right? Real-time transport visibility. So at the highest level and the most simplistic level, that's what we do. In near real time, we try to get it as close to real time as possible, but that varies by mode. We try to tell people, where their stuff is. So putting a little context around that, what do we do in practice? It is really answering two foundational and practical questions that almost every supply chain manager, transport manager, logistics manager wants to know. And that is, where's my stuff and when will it arrive? So the foundation of the service, the base of the service, anybody can understand it. It's simple. However, what it's really evolved to and what it's become, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, is also one of the first lines of risk management. So once you've produced your goods, once they're ready to ship, in the current environment, there's a lot of risk. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, later in the podcast. But there's a lot of risk, and so what it's evolved to is a lot of our customers, they look to our solution to understand not just, hey, is it nice to know where something is? So for a good customer experience, no, they're looking to understand that, hey, something just happened in the Mid East. I understand that's going to have knock-on effects. Where's my cargo rate now? So I can begin to anticipate, is the cargo not going to arrive at my transshipment port? Are there going to be vessels tied up somewhere? So I've got to understand, do I have to reroute or replan my scheduling? There's a whole host of things in that area that we do. And then again, another thing that's related is it's the visibility data, but as you emphasize, the predictions. And look, today getting predictions right on any mode is challenging. Certainly, for example, on road and rail, those are relatively consistent. And we have proprietary models we've worked on for years. So we do provide those predictions and they're highly accurate. When we get into the ocean, and that's where a lot of people are focused today for a lot of well-known reasons, it gets way more complex, particularly in the current environment of the changing ocean carrier alliances, all the geopolitical risks and that sort of thing. So, on a broad level, that's what we do. Maybe to ground that for our listeners, what does that mean in a practical sense? If we think about a truck, when were the goods picked up? Where are they as they're going along the road? And when they were delivered. Simple as that, right? A little bit like when you're waiting for your Uber car to show up. Hey, I can see it coming. That's what everybody likes. If we talk about ocean, yeah, we provide that granularity of tracking on the ship as it carries the containers, but all those milestones, loads, discharges, gate ins, gate outs, transshipment events, all those terminal events, that's what people really mean by real-time transport visibility, particularly for those two major modes.
Well, and it's so important right now. I mean, ocean shipping is kind of my background. And with so many disruptions that are happening right now, which way can we go? Which way can't the vessel go? Are we going to have to go around? There's so many different things geopolitically that are happening, um, that these are some of the questions. These are the things that people need to know in real time so they can make the decisions. If they don't know this information, let's say they've got product on a vessel that has to go maybe around a specific point and it
Mhm.
takes another 2 weeks. Well, that might not go hand in hand with what they need from an inventory standpoint, or maybe they
Mhm,
need goods for a specific launch, right?
mhm.
Or an
Yes.
event or something like that. So if they have that information in real time, they can decide if they want to ship maybe a smaller portion by air to be able to get there for a specific date.
Yeah, absolutely right, Sarah. Absolutely right. And you touched on a couple of things that, if we just think of the most recent startup of a war, unfortunately, between Israel and Iran, for all you had mentioned air freight. Well, right now, air freight's in a little bit of chaos. Why? Because what sits in the middle of there is this port or this airport. It's a port of a different form, but it's in Dubai, and it's one of the biggest air cargo transshipment ports in the world. All that is kind of stopped on a dime. Well, all those people who are shipping via air, now they have a different problem. But if they don't know where their cargo is, they can't even figure out how to reroute it. Did it
Yeah.
already arrive? Is it on its way there? Did the plane get diverted? Those are more 24-hour solvable problems. When we look at the biggest stuff, I think what you were generally referencing to was the Red Sea crisis. Hey,
Hmm.
when does this end? They're still going all the way around to Africa. The Houthis and the US seem to have come to some sort of, I won't say settlement, but they're certainly not bombing US ships anymore. What does that mean for the rest of the trade? Well, the rest of the trade right now is looking around saying, I'm not sending ships through there, or I'm not sending big container ships there. So, yeah, exactly. If you don't have a good understanding of where your cargo is, what ship is it on, how is it routed? Yeah, you can't predict credibly how am I going to manage things like buffer stock, or
Hmm.
what's my real lead time, or what's my real customer service expectation if my perfect order metric is 2 or 3 days plus minus the at the final port of delivery. Without that data, you're in many ways lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And customers know that you can get that data. So if you don't have it, they're sort of wondering why.
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. I mean, just to play on that, I mean, the Amazon effect, which we spoke about 5 years ago and 10 years ago, now it's so inculcated into everyone.
mhm.
And people are right. If I'm shipping 50 containers full of cellulose, why can't I have the same visibility or understanding of where that freight is that I get when I order a pair of shoes on Amazon or something like that?
Absolutely. Now, Shippeo operates in a very competitive and rapidly evolving space, especially around visibility. What would you say truly sets Shippeo apart from other visibility platforms on the market? This is a really great question because I'm pretty sure you get that all the time. And I'm pretty sure our audience wants to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the probably after 20 minutes or 30 minutes into our typical presentation, because most people know it's highly competitive. They've seen many presentations. Why are you, Shippeo, different? And what is your big differentiator? So there's a few things. The first and foremost and the most relevant one and salient for all of our customers is data quality.
Mhm.
Our obsessive focus on data quality. And what does that mean? It means something different by each mode and each sub mode. So if we talk about road, the question is, can you track ELDs by hitting an API endpoint? Yes, pretty much anybody can do that. That's a solved technological problem. The question is, hey, can I get a high pairing rate? If I have 100 moves today, can I really associate the correct ELD with the truck that has my load and then begin to pair that at the appropriate time so I can track when the goods are going to the origin, excuse me, when the goods are going to the pickup location, and then tracking the goods to their destination. That hypergranular quality that you can see the truck moving, that you can see and impute arrivals with geofencing and things like that, that's a big differentiator. If we think about the ocean side on data quality, yes, in principle, everybody gets the data from the same points. In principle. In fact, it's a lot harder to get high data quality. We constantly reference high nines. The customers who work with us can typically have an expectation of well above 90% as far as tracking of all their shipments. And then we get into the hypergranular thing about what about completeness? It isn't enough to know that a box was loaded on a vessel, but do I have every transshipment milestone? Do I have every discharge milestone? When it goes onto a rail move, do I understand when it was put on the rail? So when we talk about data quality, we spend a lot of time with our customers educating them about what can be a credible expectation in this market because so much of the data that's out there is essentially of a degraded quality. It's
Hmm.
basically scraped or it's hitting anonymous, not anonymous, but publicly available APIs that maybe don't have the most robust filtering or robust capture of underlying data. The other things that differentiate us are if we go deeper into the nitty gritty, and for those who are interested in it, particularly on the roadside, as I referenced, almost anyone with some aptitude in APIs can hit the endpoint of an ELD and get basic tracking data, as long as you have approval of the trucker.
Hmm.
What that doesn't solve is how do I make sure that I know when the truck is moving towards the pickup point that that's the correct truck to be tracking? And that's when we talk about pairing. And the one entity who does the pairing the best is always the same. That's the trucking company themselves. The dispatcher knows who he gave that work order to, but if you can't get that data about who actually has the work order, you're not going to get a high quality pairing rate and you're not going to get a high quality tracking rate. What
Hmm.
Shippeo has done differently, and that has a lot to do with our heritage of developing in Europe, is in the early days when we developed in Europe almost 10 years ago, it was our company was founded in France. Unlike the USA, there was GDPR, that is strong privacy protections for the drivers. You weren't allowed to just connect to an ELD endpoint and just constantly hit it and then pull the data whenever you want it and then leave it on. That was a no-go. So what our team had to evolve is from the very beginning, a solution that said, okay, we need to respect the privacy of the driver, the privacy of the carrier, but at the same time, we need to get the data for our customer because he's paying us and that carrier for that data. Because of that, we learned how, in many different ways, whether it's EDI, whether it's Edifact, whether it's API, whether it's webhooks, to integrate with a huge variety of TMS solutions in addition to the ELD solutions to one, provide for the protection and the privacy of the trucking company and the driver, but also improve the quality of the tracking data because the pairing is almost always done in the TMS. So the second differentiator is the way we approach it, while the technology is in principle in many ways identical to that of most of our competitors. What we've done is double down on a lot of these pathways because it does cost money. Because remember, if there's always a trade off, if you're going to do all this work and all this effort, somebody's going to put the time and the money into establishing this connectivity.
Yeah.
A couple of the other things that I'd say differentiate us, and these are more somewhat less qualitative, but more maybe subjective, is value to customers. In our sales process, what differentiates us is typically in the beginning of the process, we'll begin to talk about value. If we cannot agree on the value cases with the customer upfront, there really isn't a strong case for them or us to do this.
Hmm.
Because if people just want data for, well, I guess I should have the data, that's not a good business case and that isn't a long term customer relationship. You got to
Right.
have some association with what is the use case and what's the value you or your customers are going to get out of it. And then finally, I'd say we're neutral. So you've seen, particularly with some of our competitors in the very recent past, they've said, hey, essentially, I'm a broker, or I'm going to assume the role of a 3PL. In Shipio, our approach is those are our customers, just like the BCOs are, just like the shippers are. We stay in the visibility lane. That is, we're a neutral provider. All of our investors are essentially VCs or neutral parties. They're not trucking companies or ocean carriers. And we're
Hmm.
staying in our space as far as we develop our solutions. We're staying specifically out of anything that impinges on the business of some of our major 3PL, 4PL, and broker customers. Why? Because we think that's the best way to maintain good relations, and then secondly, there's still so much work to be done in this space on improving data quality and the depth of visibility data. We think there's more than enough to do here.
Absolutely. And I think what came to mind when you were talking through all of that was integrity. Right? I think at the core of Shippeo, you've got that integrity. You're respecting the truck drivers, right? Their privacy. You're respecting the industry by being a neutral party. But also, I really want to talk about that data quality because I was just talking to a chief supply chain officer and they specifically said one of the reasons why they look at a new provider is data leverage and data quality and who they're partnering with. And what does that security look like? What does the quality look like? What's the data exchange? How are they leveraging that? And so I think it's really, really important and definitely a differentiator. So I'm glad that you touched on that, but you also touched on how Shippeo started. And you said that it started in France. So I want to know a little bit more about that. What's the founder story behind Shippeo? How did the company come to life?
Yeah, so it was a group of guys in France, Pierre, Lucien, Thibaut, Brice, David, and they were all, some of them had just started their careers, some of them were just finishing up grad school, and they had decided they were going to start a startup. And they didn't have a lot of depth of domain knowledge in transportation, logistics, or supply chain. But the problem they came upon, and it's like a lot of people at that time, they had heard about, hey, there's this thing about truck tracking. It seems to be a requirement, just like in the USA and Europe at that time, and it varies by country. But in Europe at that time, there were mandates about safety, right? Just like it happened in the USA, everybody's got to have an ELD. Why? Because the logs have to now be electronic, so we could better control the hours of the driver. Because of course, accidents and insurance at that time, it was deemed it's too risky. People are driving too long and they're crashing. Just like here in the USA, our competitors saw, wait a minute, I can take that data and now sell that data to people who want visibility. These guys also saw, wait a minute, yes, we could get that data. Same sort of thing. We can provide visibility to all of our customers or all of our potential customers. And so what they did is they spent the first couple of years, basically, I'd say 2 to 3 years, figuring out the industry. And the advantage they had is because they didn't come from the industry, is they were able to come at it eyes wide open. They weren't inhibited by saying, "Oh, well, I know phone apps are the way to go," or "Hey, there's only a certain amount of configurability with a set API that's accepted, so I've got to be bound by that." They came into it and they said, "Well, in principle, we can do anything because we don't know that much." And so, out of that, that's how we developed these ideas, particularly to be GDR compliant, or not developing the idea, making sure we were GDPR compliant, but at the same time coming across the problem, wait a minute, it's not just the tracking, it's the pairing of the data to make sure you have this high quality road tracking to really make it work. And that's where our guys excelled. And because Europe is, I think most people here know, yes, it's the European Union, but it's kind of 26, 27 different countries.
Mhm.
It is not like the US where you come here and there's some regulations that are pretty much everywhere, and then the state regulations, but it's pretty easy to comply. In Europe, there's a lot of different rules and regulations still. So the application had to deal with many more requirements, many more specific instances. For example, in Europe, it's very common to have what's called groupage, where the guy who's driving from Belarus coming into Poland, he's not driving from Poland to Germany. And the box is destined for
Mm.
Spain. So they'll hand off the box 2 or 3 times. Well, wait a minute. How do you ensure seamless tracking when you essentially have 3 different units, 3 different trucks with 3 different ELDs, 3 different companies? That gets a little bit complicated. That ended up playing to our advantage when we came into the North American market, which is by no means simple, by no means easy. It's just not as complicated as that. So in that sense, our guys, they really dug in. They learned it from the ground up. They developed a solution for a very sophisticated market. And the benefit that has come to us is that we find that almost regardless of where we go, we operate in China. Things for the most part work fine. So anyway, that's sort of the founding story. And all of our founders are still with us and on the executive team. So
Wow.
unlike a little bit like the American model where, hey, I got there the first 3 years and there was churn and new VCs came in and cashing out, that's not their model. Their model is, nope, we're the team. We founded this. We're going to be here for a long time. We're going to continue to build this.
I appreciate you for sharing that story. I always love to hear a founder's story because I'd like to hear whether they're from the industry or not. But I also want to find out, what sparked the interest? What sparked the idea? What did that look like? And how did you build? Right? Because you build a company and you build it on blocks, you build it on an idea, and sometimes that idea pivots into something different than you thought you were originally going to do. And so it's always fascinating to hear that. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about your ideal customer. I think this is such an important question because like you said, when you go into the value stage, not everybody is the ideal customer for Shippeo, but also vice versa. So, who is Shippeo built for? What kinds of challenges are they usually trying to solve when they come to you?
Yeah, so let's get into that because such a there's a lot of depth there, right? So like every customer, we have our ICP, our ideal customer profile. Our preference is for larger customers with very complex supply chains because that's where we can really shine because we do cover all modes, we do cover all geographies, we do understand the complexity of Not every situation, but most parts of the world, we have a body of experience. We can say, okay, we've seen this, we understand how to address it. If we go a little bit deeper, though, how do we qualify customers and know it's a good fit for us? It's the most foundational thing, what we discussed earlier, which is, do they have a problem?
Mm,
If there's no clear problem to solve, or they're not committed to identifying and solving the problems in their supply chain as it pertains to visibility, there's really not a good way for us to work with them. Because our whole way of working, our whole go to market motion with a customer is first making sure, do we have a clear understanding of the customer's problem? Then we have to go in detail and understand how they operate. It isn't a case that you can just turn it on and it's magic. Particularly when we talk about the road mode or intermodal modes, it gets complicated pretty quick. And so you have to spend a fair amount of time doing discovery. So our best customers are big, large, complex supply chains, although we do work with a lot of mid-tier guys who are, let's say, 500 million or less, and everything works out fine there too. But the key thing is that they have a problem and they're committing to solving it. We
mhm,
get a little bit deeper into that. What are the things they're typically trying to solve? Almost always the first thing, and I'd say 7 out of 10 engagements, it's customer experience. In the
mm,
B2C world, whether we're in retail or the B2B world, we're very strong in petrochemicals, we're very strong in lumber, cellulose, in those areas. And you'd think, hey, customer experience, what are they talking about? I'd argue today, exactly the same thing as somebody selling that pair of shoes on Amazon. That's their argument. The experience of buying 100 tons of high quality cellulose, they want that experience for their customer, just like when you ordered that pair of shoes from Amazon. It was what you ordered, it was on time, they could see it coming. And then, as importantly, if there was a delay or if something went wrong, you're the first to tell them. You give them a heads up. Why? Because that improves the customer experience in a very competitive environment. And in the B2B world, just like the B2C world, it's super competitive. People say, no, those contracts are long term and all that. Yeah, that's true, but it's not as true as it once was.
yeah.
So I'd say customer experience is typically first. Then we get into all the operational side of things. On ocean, we can almost bet, again, 6 to 7 times out of 10, the first thing the customer will mention is detention and demurrage. How can I better manage my D&D costs? For the big guys, they pay millions a month. They don't know where that money goes. They say, hey, I got the bill from the carrier. It's 3 million over here. It's 1.5 million over here. I don't really know how I got into this situation. Well, what can we do is we can help solve that. We can say, here's the visibility, here's the alert. Remember, you only have 4 free days with this carrier. It's day 3. If you do not move this box now, you will have a problem. Or giving them the retrospective analysis, and given your background, Sarah, I think you can understand this. Hey, I'm going into a carrier negotiation again. Do I have all the data I need about port pairs, about dwell times, about underlying performance, the number of transshipments? What was the service they promised me last year, and what did they deliver? And as it pertains specifically to D&D, where do I actually need free time? Because maybe in Savannah, I don't need 10 days. Maybe I just need 4 or 5 days, the standard, and it's
Right.
fine. But when I negotiate the agreement with the carrier, if I had the historical data that said, hey, but in Jebel Ali, I need 8 days. That's my sweet spot for free time because I always need, for whatever reason, that much time to get it off the terminal. That's where I could save millions of dollars.
Mhm.
We see a core bucket of 7 value drivers, and under each of those value drivers, we have dozens of specific use cases that our customers typically embrace. And we can go much deeper into lead time management, buffer stock management, controlling of financial costs for the guys who sell goods at the discharge at the port of final destination.
Mhm.
If you can shrink your delivery time from 68 days to 54 days, and you're paying a commercial rate of 6% of financing, even if that's internally on your balance sheet, well, if I'm moving tens of millions of goods each month,
Mhm.
that's a big savings. We can do something in the millions there. And it
Yeah.
goes on in a variety of other cases also.
All the capital costs. And we're going to get to a real life example of that in a minute. But I want to go back to what you said about customer experience. I recently had a company on the show talking about how they had helped their customer be able to have the inventory on hand in a variety of different stores, and that increased obviously the amount purchased from them on a monthly basis because they were able to have that in stock. And so I think it's interesting when you talk about B2B and you talk about visibility and you talk about the customer experience around that and those different industries that you mentioned. But it makes a big difference because if they have the product and their competition does not, they're the ones that are going to get the sale every single time. And it makes a really, really big difference. Now, you've worked with some pretty big names. Can you share a real life story of a customer that you've helped? Like, what was the challenge that they had? What solution did you provide? And what ROI did they see?
Yeah, so we've worked with a lot of the big guys. We're pretty big in the automotive space, the petrochemicals space. But the customer I'd like to share today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Yamaha, Yamaha Motor. So Yamaha, big global conglomerate, headquartered out of Japan, ships literally tens of thousands of containers each quarter, does hundreds of thousands of truck moves also each quarter. And the problem that we helped solve there was first and foremost basic visibility to improve customer experience, but also to improve their internal operations and on two core modes, ocean and road. So if I start with ocean, like many big organizations, while they had access to a lot of data and they had access to a lot of solutions, and they have great partners with their forwarders and their ocean carriers, the challenge was very simple to understand, that there wasn't one funnel that had all the data that could be expressed in one system, and then that could be pumped back into their SAP applications in a clean, robust, and consistent way. And that
Mm,
was job one, to solve that. And that Shippeo is ideally suited for. We're already connected to all their ocean carriers. We're able to easily get all that data. They love the super high degree of granularity. And what they did is they began using it exactly in the value cases we discussed, which is, hey, I can now begin sharing information with, if we take outboard motors, I can tell all of our dealers exactly when those containers will hit the West Coast,
mhm,
when they're arriving via train at the ramp, or if we're trucking it, even if it's a multi-stop delivery, when the dealer will get the goods. So first they improved their customer service with their dealer network.
mm,
The knock-on effect there was they were able to improve their customer service with their end customers through their dealers,
mm,
because the dealer knows, hey, this 150 Yamaha, it's the beginning of the summer. Everybody wants this outboard motor. I've got a lot of people who want to buy it, but they don't want to buy it in September. They want to buy it now. But if I can give them an assurance that, hey, I know I don't have two of these here for you right now, but I will have that at the end of next week, that customer is going to buy. And he's also going to appreciate, hey, look at what Yamaha did for me. They got me the motors I wanted. They got it when I wanted. Beginning of the summer, I was able to enjoy it. So a classic customer experience, beneficial experience. The
mhm,
second thing on the ocean was, as we discussed, simple as rocks, D&D and lead time management. Can I reduce my detention and demurrage costs, whether it's for engines going into Indonesia, or freight coming onto the US West Coast, or freight going to the Northwest continent? And again, we were able to reduce that typically on an order of 10 to 20%. So that's big. They have, without disclosing any proprietary information, yes, they spend a lot of money on D&D. It's very material and tangible, that 10 to 20% that they're saving. The third area that we saw on their ocean team, again, while they had access to a lot of data in different areas, it was as simple as personnel productivity. There were still endless people collating spreadsheets, putting together data, hacking it in, sending it to customers, sending it to dealers, giving it to managers, all the same stuff you've seen for the last 20 years.
mhm,
Most of that goes away. It simply doesn't happen. If you want a spreadsheet, click the screen, it downloads immediately with all your stuff. If you still want to do it that way, you can. But what we also did is we simplified that greatly for them.
mm.
With the links, we were able to allow them to give links to their customers, to their dealers, even sometimes up to your boss. You don't need to ask me every day about this shipment. Just click the link. There it is. So there were some classic things there. If we switch over to the road mode, I've already touched on some of it, but it's all very similar things. Whether it was penalties for late deliveries, even though in many cases it's their own network, or whether it was making sure there's enough warehouse personnel at their warehouse to unload those trailers, make sure they get it into the warehouse, and then do the cross dock or the transload into the 53 to get those goods out to the dealers. Those were big in material savings. Typically, there is on the warehousing side, on the labor side, a 10 to 15% improvement in productivity. Why? Because I don't have staff standing around. I see where the truck is. I know that truck is not going to arrive today. There's no point in me asking for a gang to stay on for an extra shift. The
Right.
box isn't going to arrive, or the truck isn't going to arrive. Conversely, I see tomorrow I have 3 deliveries in the morning. I want to emphasize, yes, I need more people, I need more power, I need more forklifts because those trucks are going to arrive. I can see they're less than, for example, 200 miles away. So in that way, I think we've got some real tangible use
Mhm.
cases, and we can go through this in many different verticals. If we think of some of our bigger accounts, like if I take Renault, using a French company, that's our origin. You'd expect we'd be close in the automotive space, same sort of thing, but even down to the production level, watching their
Wow.
supply side come in to mitigate things like factory stoppages, which for them that's the main ROI. Do
Oof.
not stop the line.
That's a
Exactly.
lot of money saved. I can tell you that. I mean, those lines going down cost a lot of money on a day-to-day basis, and not having to do that is going to be a huge win for that company. But I appreciate you for sharing the different examples, because sometimes with different solutions, we only get one example, so we only see one side of it. But in your example, we were able to see how you helped on the ocean freight side, and then again on the trucking side,
Yeah.
and you tied it together with the customer experience, which I like, because that's how everybody wins, because that's really at the end of the day what organizations are looking for as an end result from the partners that they're working with. Now, I want to talk to you about prediction because we mentioned it sort of at the beginning of the show. I think
Mhm.
it's the new sort of prevention. Talk to me about how Shippeo is using AI and maybe predictive analytics to help customers move from being reactive to proactive, because it's the proactivity that's going to keep everybody competitive and have sort of that competitive advantage.
Yeah. So this gets a little bit complicated quick, so I'll try to keep it digestible and simple. So
Yes, please.
essentially, we started working years ago, like most companies, on machine learning. Machine learning is in many ways a precursor to artificial intelligence. There's a spectrum there, and of course, now we're going into generative AI, agentic AI, a whole different host of AIs that, or AI types or categories that weren't even possible a few years ago, whether it's LLM or neural networks or that sort of thing. But grounding it in reality, okay, let's talk about predictions on the road versus the ocean, because those are the two that people are asking for all the time. Prediction on a plane, it's interesting, but pretty much if it goes up, it's going to be there within 24 hours. If you know
Fair.
when it left, 99% of the time, within 12 hours, I bet you could predict it. So the
Fair.
things that people focus on are first on the road. And there we've developed proprietary technology based predominantly on machine learning, but we are incorporating AI into that. It's tough to get road much more accurate than we have it today. We have SLAs where we guarantee our prediction quality, but you can. We always think there's room to improve. Will that be agentic AI? No, I doubt it. It might be some sort of generative AI or other types of modeling our guys come up with. But we continue to work on that all the time. But the prediction on the road is, again, usually it's within one day, the vast majority of time, or in a big move in the US or a big move in Europe, it's within 3 days. That's pretty much the longest you're going to have. On those, we do use the machine learning, again, our proprietary model. We are experimenting with new AI models and new ways of working with the data that some of this AI has enabled, and we're constantly incorporating that. It's all the specific variables you already know of. What does the traffic congestion look like? What does the weather look like? Did the driver stop? Has there been an accident? There's so many things that go into that. At the same time, you have to enhance, and this is the other side of it, you have to enhance the data you're getting to make the prediction. And what do I mean by that? Telematics devices aren't perfect, particularly when you're going through a city. You'll see the truck going down the road, and then the telematic will send out a ping, but it deflected off a glass building, and it now shows the truck 2 miles to the left. Well, you have to have a technology, an expertise that says, hey, I can normalize that data. Because if the truck really is 2 miles to the left, then we're completely off. This delivery isn't going to take place in that time frame. Why do
Right.
I bring this up? It's because it's not just focusing on making a simple linear algorithmic prediction. You have to sit there and say, hold it, I've got to look at the data. What's the quality of that underlying data? How can I enhance and improve that data to feed, whether it's machine learning engines or AI engines, to produce a better outcome? On the
Hmm.
road, good, under control, works pretty well. On ocean, particularly the last 6 months, it's kind of chaos. It's very, very difficult. As you know, and most of your listeners probably know, what we just saw on the ocean side is all the major alliances just switched. So Maersk and MSC, the 2M over, MSC going their own way, Maersk jumping into Gemini with Hapag and their whole new structure, ONE and their partners changing greatly. And then also we have the Ocean Alliance, basically CMA and the major Asian carrier or the major Chinese and Taiwanese carriers. The complexity there is first, they were moving vessels around at an epic scale, literally thousands of vessels switching their rotations, switching the lanes they were in. And this can't take place instantaneously. Those are big, big trade lanes. So what are they doing? They're moving vessels from maybe the North Atlantic going to Asian transshipment location now because that's part of the new rotation. That
Right.
really brought chaos in. What we've done to address that is, again, we started with machine learning. We do take all that satellite data. We take vast amounts of historical data. We take all the scheduling data in as near real time as we can get it. And we're constantly using those engines to try and predict more accurately. But I will say on the ocean side, it's been tough. We do see the application of AI, particularly in the ability to better ingest weather patterns, to better ingest some sort of social patterns. I'd say it isn't, from our perspective, it's still too early to take the human out of the loop. And some of these things like strikes or fires on ships and things like that, where a human has to say, wait a minute, this is significant in material. The machine can't spot it yet, but this will have a major impact on, when we think about the Red Sea again, referencing that, the first few days, nobody knew what the impact was. Even
Right.
the machines get confused. Until they're fed more data, you can't do much with it.
Hmm.
Long-winded way of saying, we do believe the application of some of our AI modeling will make a big difference there. But yeah, we constantly work on the predictions, always trying to improve them, and it is very challenging.
Yeah, and I think it's an exciting future for visibility. I think, like you said, there's still a lot of work to do.
Mhm.
And I think that we're going to see some, pretty big changes within not only the industry, but the impact that visibility has and predictive has on the industry and supply chains as a whole. I want to change course a little bit, though. I want to ask you about sustainability because I know that this is a top priority for a lot of companies today. And so I just want to ask you, what role do you think visibility can play in helping organizations achieve their environmental goals? This is
Mhm.
something that I talk to a lot of chief supply chain officers when they're looking to partner with a new technology. This is something that they want to make sure that they're partnering for long term. I know you said earlier you want to partner for long term. And so this is something that I think comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And given our European heritage and now in America for many years, because it's almost as important here, yeah,
Mhm.
we take the whole green initiative very, very seriously. Years ago, we introduced our first tracking for carbon footprint, carbon intensity, carbon expenditure, and today we offer a fully GLEC certified carbon tool that's part and parcel of our solution. Do customers want it? Absolutely. It's already mandated in many parts of Europe that you have to be able to report. And we're not using beginner solutions. We partner closely with Sea Routes. They've worked with us for years and are one of the leaders in starting this. And we've ingested a lot of their calculations into our application so we can give our customers that true exposure of if we're looking at a road, hey, how much burn do you have between Chicago going to Cleveland based on what types of trucks you're using, what type of engines you're using, the specific fuel types they have, so you can better understand, hey, who are my data providers as far as mitigating my carbon emissions? If we think about the ocean side, it's very similar, but you can also begin to get much more detailed about understanding, wait a minute, this routing A, transshipment through Singapore, for example, is much more carbon efficient with ocean carrier B than it is with ocean carrier C going through Tanjung Palapas. And what that does is it gives our customers the flexibility to really impact what is their carbon burn. Because even though there's many changes around the world about perspectives on this, I think for most of our customers who work in a very international environment, mitigating carbon exposure is critical and important, but they need to do it in a way that's cost effective. And what
Yeah.
we do is we give them the visibility to see that and then the capability to at least make basic decisions about who is the better carrier when I have a comparison about carbon emissions, and then what is the best routing, whether it's road, whether it's ocean. We can even begin doing it in air. What is the best way to do this to mitigate my carbon expenditure? And then finally, how can I report this in a way
Mhm.
that's going to be accepted by government agencies that says, okay, you gave me a report, this is GLEC certified, this is verifiable. So that's
Yeah.
that's what we're doing on the carbon side.
Well, and I love to see the collaboration. I know C Roots well, and I love that you're talking about that collaboration between organizations to be able to make the impact for the customer. Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to support them with some of that reporting or all of the reporting based on the different governments that they're reporting to as well. It's not an easy job, and everybody has to come together to be able to do that. So I appreciate your outlook and providing the outlook on that because I think it's really critical to have a partner who's thinking about those three levels of sustainability for your customers. So I could talk to you all day, Chris. You're passionate about the industry, how you explain everything, how you explain visibility, how you explain the predictive model, and how you're using AI and machine learning. But I have one last question for you. If you could give supply chain leaders one piece of advice about future proofing their logistics strategy, what would it be?
That's very start now. When the next problem occurs, and it's just around the corner, we don't know which one it is. If you don't already have the data, if you don't already have your visibility data, if you haven't studied it, if you don't know how to read it, if you don't know how to use it, it's a little bit like buying cyber protection after you've been hacked. It's not going to work. Have a bias for action. Maybe you can't make big strategic decisions in this time of uncertainty, but what you can do is you can make decisions like getting visibility under control, having this data now and ready for you. And it's not like you need to make a 5-year commitment or a 10-year commitment with a factory or a warehouse. You can do this now. And given the environment we're in, yes, have that bias for action.
Have the bias for action. I love that advice. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your insights into what Shippeo is doing to transform the world of real-time visibility. That customer story alone and several of the stories that you shared throughout this episode shows just how powerful the right technology can be when it comes to building smarter, faster, and more resilient supply chains. To our listeners, if you're looking for a visibility partner that goes beyond track and trace and actually helps you make better decisions in real time, head over to shippeo.com to learn more. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review the show. We've got more incredible guests and innovative strategies coming your way. Until next time, I'm Sarah Barnes Humphrey, and this is Let's Talk Supply Chain.